The sky over the shattered world of Valtrax burned orange with flames. Ash rained like snow, silent and steady, covering the once glorious spires of the Trelixan capital. Captain Dovek of the Draxari Confederation stood on the highest remaining balcony of the command tower, watching it all crumble. They were supposed to win this war. His clawed fingers clenched the railing, the metal bending under the pressure. They had called for help weeks ago. The Valtrax system was a critical node, strategically invaluable. The human-controlled zone lay just 2 jumps away. Surely their allies would have responded by now. Dovek snarled. "Where are they?" He hissed to no one. His second-in-command, Relek, stepped beside him, his face blank under the blue glow of the holographic distress logs. "No response from the Terran High Command," Relek said. "Only silence." It wasn't just silence. It was betrayal. The humans had pledged allegiance to the Confederation during the Pact of Saron. Mutual defense, technological exchange, trade routes. They'd signed it with smiles and handshakes. Earth had been the scrappy newcomer, surprisingly advanced for their age, but eager to belong, or so they'd claimed. Now, when the Draxari needed them most, Earth had gone dark. "We misjudged them," Dovek growled. "They took our tech, our secrets, and left us to die." In orbit above, the last Draxari battleship was being torn apart by Charnathan cruisers, black, spiked monsters that cut through defenses like claws through flesh. The Charnathans didn't negotiate. They didn't ask for surrender. They just erased civilizations. The Valtrax system was their latest conquest. Dovek turned away from the carnage. His fleet was gone, ground defenses in shambles, reinforcements not coming. And Earth had vanished behind diplomatic silence. He slammed his fist into the wall, cracking the stone. "We will not beg." "No, Captain," Relek said, his voice suddenly tight. "But someone else just did." Dovek paused. "What?" Relek turned the holoscreen toward him. "Intercepted a message from the Charnathan fleet. They hailed someone, not us, not even each other. They believed reinforcements were coming." Dovek narrowed his eyes. "Their allies?" Relek nodded. "Except, the response wasn't in Charnathan dialect. It was Terran standard, human military protocol." Dovek blinked. "What did it say?" Relek hesitated, then recited. "Stand by for orbital cleansing. Reinforcements inbound. Earth doesn't abandon its own." For a second, neither of them moved. The room felt frozen in place. Dovek's breath caught. They're coming." Relek was already spinning the comms controls. "It's more than that. We just picked up 35 Terran warships emerging from phase space around the Valtrax system." Dovek rushed to the viewport, his heart pounding. The sky above shimmered, then bent inward like a bubble of glass collapsing. Then, boom. A pulse of light, bright enough to blind. The Terran fleet dropped into real space like thunder given shape. Sleek steel hulls, jet-black armor. Ships that weren't meant to intimidate. They were built to end things. "Sweet void," Relek whispered. "They're not responding to our hails. They're on a closed comms loop." Dovek stared in disbelief. "What are they doing?" And then it happened. Without ceremony, without warning, the human ships launched a synchronized volley. Precision strikes. Orbital fire so fast and hot it sliced through Charnathan cruisers like paper. No taunts, no battle cries, just quiet, surgical annihilation. Dovek watched as the enemies that had torn his world apart were reduced to fragments and fire. The humans hadn't forgotten. They'd just waited until they could end the war in one move. The blast wave rippled through the air like a god had exhaled fire. Captain Dovek braced himself as the control tower groaned beneath the pressure, the glass panes shattering, sending shards across the command floor. Below them, the Valtrax surface lit up in streaks of white-hot plasma. Entire enemy fortifications vanished beneath Earth's orbital barrage, precise and merciless. Dovek stumbled to the window, his vision still flickering from the brightness. Outside, the sky burned with descending Terran drop pods, thousands of them. Black darts, piercing through the atmosphere in perfect coordination. It wasn't just an intervention. It was an execution. "They're not just fighting the Charnathans," Relic murmured, stunned. "They're erasing them." Dovek's throat tightened. This wasn't the Earth he'd known from diplomatic tables and polite conferences. This was something rawer, older, like they'd carried some deep darkness within their species all along and only now had chosen to let it surface. "Get me visual uplinks on the ground units," Dovek ordered. "I want to see what kind of devils we've been drinking tea with." The command interface flickered to life. Drone feeds streamed in, and there they were, Terran Marines. Not tall like the Draxari, not monstrous like the Charnathans, but terrifying in how methodical they were. Each soldier moved like a cog in some massive machine. They swept through the rubble in squads, their movements drilled to perfection, helmets black, armor reflective, no identifying marks except a single red line across their chests. In one feed, a Marine crouched behind fallen debris, waiting for a Charnathan patrol to pass. He didn't breathe, didn't twitch, and when he moved, it was swift. 3 silenced shots, 3 kills. The Terran didn't even pause. He just signaled and advanced. Another feed showed them storming a fortified bunker. Draxari Command had failed to take it in 7 hours. The humans took it in 17 minutes. "They're not just soldiers," Relic said quietly. "They're Reapers in armor." Dovek nodded. "And we're damn lucky they're not here for us." But there was a pit in his gut, one that said they might not be here because of the Confederation. Earth hadn't responded to diplomatic calls, hadn't coordinated, hadn't even acknowledged distress signals. They hadn't come to help, they'd come to clean up. Far above, orbit was chaos. Charnathan fleets scrambled, breaking rank. Panic comms echoed across the void, intercepted and decrypted by Terran AI before they were even finished. "Requesting backup. Sector 9 collapsing. Evacuation impossible. The Terran cruisers have cut through our thrusters. Where are the dreadnoughts? Command, respond." The Charnathan flagship, Zuralok, tried to retreat. It spun away from the planet, engines blazing, but the Terrans had anticipated it. A human stealth cruiser blinked into existence right beside it, like it had been stalking its prey. It didn't fire missiles. It didn't need to. A single beam of blue-white energy lanced through the Zuralok's midsection, slicing it like fruit. The ship split apart, silent and perfect. Inside, hundreds of alien warriors were vaporized in a millisecond. In the Valtrax command tower, Dovek watched it happen, his heart pounding. "This isn't war," he muttered. "It's a goddamn reckoning." Rilek turned toward him. "You think the humans knew?" "Knew what?" "That we'd fall, that the Charnathans would come for us, that if they waited, they could end both threats in one move." Dovek didn't answer, because part of him had wondered the same. On the ground, Sergeant Aiden Cross advanced with his squad through the blackened streets of Valtrax Prime. His HUD flickered with targeting data, heartbeat monitors, squad vitals. His voice was steady, but his thoughts were boiling. The briefing had been short. Deploy. Eliminate all Charnathan presence. Avoid unnecessary contact with Draxari. They didn't say save them. Just don't kill them unless they're in the way. "Contact right corner," barked his corporal. Cross raised his rifle. One shot. The Charnathan soldier folded backwards, its carapace exploding in a mist of green fluid. "Clear," the corporal said. Cross moved up. Around him, Drexari bodies lay crumpled beneath broken banners. Some had fought hard. Others had tried to flee. It didn't matter. The Charnathons didn't care. And Earth, well, Earth had learned from that. Every time Earth had asked for help in its early days, the Confederation had hesitated, danced around protocol, waited for confirmation of urgency. They'd left humans to die, to fend for themselves against pirate invasions, rogue empires, interstellar diseases. Earth had remembered every single one of those betrayals. And now? Now the humans were doing what they did best, surviving with vengeance. Back in orbit, the last of the Charnathan ships tried to flee. A handful escaped into deep space, running with tails between legs, but most were hunted down by Terran interceptor drones, silent, swift, merciless. The Terran commander, General Marcus Wren, stood on the bridge of the ISS Revenant, watching the last red dot disappear from the tactical map. "Status?" he asked. "Planetfall successful. Charnathan resistance is below 10%. No major Terran casualties." Wren nodded. "Keep suppression units in orbit for another 48 hours. Tell the AI to flag any hostile signal and burn it." "Yes, sir." Another officer cleared her throat. "Sir, the Drexari are hailing us." Wren's jaw clenched. "Ignore it." "Sir? You heard me?" The bridge went silent. Wren didn't need to explain. The Drexari hadn't helped when Earth needed it. Now Earth wasn't interested in talking. Not yet. Maybe not ever. On the surface, Dovek watched as a Terran dropship landed in the courtyard. Dust blew through the ruins. The hatch hissed open, and out stepped a squad of soldiers. The one in front removed his helmet. A human male, mid-40s. Sharp eyes, square jaw, no emotion. Just like the war. "Captain Dovek?" he asked. Dovek stepped forward. "Yes." "Sergeant Cross, Terran Expeditionary Forces." Dovek gave a slight nod. "You have our gratitude." Cross looked at him for a moment. "We didn't come for gratitude." Dovek's brow furrowed. "Then why?" Cross paused. His voice was steady when he answered. "We came because Earth doesn't forget." He didn't explain. He didn't have to. Dovek sat in the remnants of what used to be the War Council Hall. The ceiling had collapsed in 3 places, exposing the shattered sky. Smoke curled up from the cracked floor tiles, carrying the smell of plasma and burnt flesh. Around him, flickering data panels from broken consoles pulsed weakly, echoing the heartbeat of a world on life support. Across from him stood Sergeant Aidan Cross, expression blank, posture perfect. He hadn't sat, didn't ask for water. He stood like a statue carved from discipline, built not to comfort, but to remind. Dovek felt the weight of his presence. Not in size. Humans were smaller than Drexari. But in silence. Like he carried an entire planet's pain behind his eyes and refused to let anyone else hold even a fragment. "I need to understand," Dovek finally said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Why now?" Cross didn't answer immediately. He let the moment stretch. When he spoke, it was like peeling off a scab. "We didn't come here to help you," he said. "We came because they poked us." Dovek frowned. "The Charnathans?" Cross nodded. "They hit a refugee freighter 2 weeks ago. Civilian ship. No weapons, no armor. All humans." "Casualties?" "All of them." Dovek exhaled sharply. "That's monstrous." Cross's eyes didn't waver. "You're shocked. We're not. This galaxy has never cared what happens to humans unless we fight back. So we learned to fight smarter, meaner." He leaned forward slightly. "You know what that ship was doing?" Dovek shook his head. "It was heading toward one of your colonies, hoping you'd take them in. People running from debt collectors, bad governments, warlords. You knew they were coming. You didn't respond." Dovek blinked. Our bureaucracy is slow." Cross cut him off with a glare. Don't! Just don't! That delay cost 427 lives. Children, mothers, people who believed the Confederation still had a heart. Silence hung thick between them. We buried them in space, Cross said, and the next morning, we mobilized. Back aboard the ISS Revenant, General Wren stood alone in the debriefing chamber, watching projections from the early years of humanity's integration into galactic politics. Old news clips played on loop, humans shaking hands with Trelxan ministers, offering aid to wounded planets, signing diplomatic accords. Naive optimism filled those early broadcasts. Earth, new to the stars, still believed in cooperation. Back then, they'd thought they could belong. But the video changed. Clips of human aid convoys being denied landing rights, pirate raids ignored by allies, epidemics left unchecked because quarantine protocols didn't prioritize non-founding species. Each betrayal stacked like bricks in a silent, growing wall between Earth and the rest of the stars. And then the final video. A human child, covered in soot and blood, crying in a refugee shelter after a Confederation embargo stranded their colony. Wren's jaw tightened. He remembered that boy. That boy had been his son. Meanwhile, in a bunker deep beneath Valtrax Prime, Drexari officials gathered in secret. The planet was officially liberated, but they didn't trust their saviors. No one did. They didn't answer our distress calls, one councilman hissed. They waited until the last second, until we were bleeding, and then they showed up like executioners pretending to be medics. They're here for revenge, not rescue, another spat. They want the Charnathans dead. We're just background noise. High Commander Trevin, the highest-ranking Draxari left alive on Valtrax, stood at the head of the table. He was older than Dovek, more calculating, and his gaze was locked on a datapad showing orbital positions of Terran fleets. They've stationed their warships in orbit with perfect coverage, he said slowly. We couldn't evacuate a single vessel without their permission. One of the aides swallowed hard. Do you think they mean to conquer us? Triven's silence was answer enough. Back on the surface, Cross walked through the ruins with Dovek, inspecting what remained of Drexari resistance points. The dead lay in neat rows. Human medics had recovered every corpse, Drexari and Terran alike. It was unnerving. They buried our dead, Dovek muttered, watching two Terran soldiers lower a Drexari warrior into a crater-turned grave. They don't even speak our language, but they knew to do this. Cross didn't reply immediately. It's not about honor, he finally said. It's about leaving a message. What kind of message? That Earth doesn't forget who died. Or why. Dovek looked at him, unsettled. You keep saying that. Earth doesn't forget. What exactly are you remembering? Cross finally stopped walking. He looked out across the burning skyline. His voice, when it came, was quiet. Every ally who left us to bleed. Every treaty you abandoned. Every time you said Earth is too emotional, too primitive. You told us we weren't ready for the stars, so we built a new kind of readiness. He turned, eyes burning. You made us into this. The ripple effect of Earth's strike echoed across the galaxy. On the planet Grellan, the Trelxan High Council scrambled emergency meetings. In the Zelveth Empire, border patrols were doubled. No one expected the humans to respond like this, so fast, so coordinated, so brutal. The Confederation's central AI, HALYS, predicted a 43% increase in Terran fear quotient across known systems within 6 days. In a small trade colony near the edge of known space, a merchant muttered under his breath, "They used to smile so much. Now they come wearing helmets." The humans had changed, and the rest of the galaxy had no idea how to deal with it. On day 3, after the invasion, Dovek was summoned to the ISS Revenant. He was escorted by 2 Terran Marines, silent and cold. No pleasantries, no introductions, just a walk through sterile steel hallways until he reached the observation deck. General Marcus Wren stood there, arms folded, watching a 3D model of the Charnathan homeworld. "Do you know what this is?" Wren asked without turning. Dovek stared. "It's their capital." Wren nodded. "We've isolated 25 strategic nodes. Military, government, infrastructure. If we fire at exact intervals using our quantum disruptors, we can sever their command grid in under 40 minutes. Dovek frowned. "You're going to invade?" "No," Wren said. "We're going to decapitate. We don't want territory, we want finality." Dovek was stunned. "You mean to destroy them?" Wren turned. His eyes held no hate, just clarity. Cold, surgical, final. "We're going to make sure they never come back." The Charnathan homeworld, Rexus, had once been a monument to brutality disguised as order. Its cities were carved into the rock of red deserts, camouflaged by radiation storms, protected by orbital shields so dense no pirate fleet had ever breached them. Charnathan dominance had lasted for centuries. Until now. When the Earth fleet arrived in Rexus orbit, they didn't send an ultimatum. They didn't send a demand. They sent silence. A line of Terran warships spread across the exosphere in a perfect arc. No response to hails, no visible weapon charging, just presence, like the shadow of a predator too confident to growl. Inside the Charnathan War Council chambers, panic boiled beneath the surface. "We must strike now," roared Commander Gorvak, slamming his armored fist on the obsidian table, "before they engage." "And lose half our fleet in the first volley?" hissed Chancellor Vrekna, her frills twitching in fear. "You saw what they did to our dreadnoughts at Valtrax. These aren't Draxari ships, they're hunters." Gorvak bared his fangs. "Then what would you have us do? Surrender? Beg?" The chamber fell quiet. They all knew what Earth's silence meant. There would be no surrender, no negotiation, only judgment. One of the aides, barely an adult by Charnathan standards, whispered the words that none of them wanted to say aloud. They came for vengeance. On the Terran command ship, ISS Revenant, General Marcus Wren stared at the tactical holograms, fingers steepled in thought. "Readouts?" he asked. "Charnathan fleet status, 62% active, 38% mobilizing. No signs of aggressive movement. They're afraid." Wren nodded slowly. They should be. He walked slowly to the central deck window, where the planet Rexus loomed below, dark and foreboding. "You know the problem with old empires?" Wren said to his XO. "They believe fear is something they control, something they wield. But fear is viral. You infect others, sure, but it always mutates. And one day, it comes back in a form you can't vaccinate against." He turned toward the crew. Earth was that virus, dormant, quiet, underestimated. He paused. Not anymore. Across the galaxy, systems that had once mocked Earth now held closed-door sessions with trembling voices. Even the Trelixan, founders of the Confederation, couldn't deny what was happening. Ambassador Relkor paced before the Galactic Ethics Council. "We allowed this. We created the monster. Do you realize what Earth has become?" High Counselor Avon of the Zelveth Empire tilted his head. "They're cleaning up your mess." "No," Relkor snapped. "They're cleaning everyone's mess, and they're not asking permission. They don't need it." The room fell into an uneasy silence. The ethical line between savior and executioner had begun to blur. Back on Valtrax, Dovek stood before a makeshift memorial. Names carved into steel scraps. Draxari, Terran, even a few Charnathan defectors. Cross stood beside him, helmet off, eyes hollow. We got confirmation this morning, Cross said. About what? Your leadership tried to request formal reparations from Earth, economic support, reconstruction aid. Dovek's brow furrowed. And? Earth ignored it. No reply. They're not here to rebuild, just to erase threats. Dovek felt the blow in his gut. So this is it. They save us from extinction, then leave us to rot? Cross didn't answer, because he didn't need to. On Rexus, the Charnathan military tried one last desperate move. They launched a stealth vessel, a diplomatic ship, white-flagged, unarmed toward the Earth fleet. Its mission? To beg. Inside the vessel, Ambassador Thralak trembled. He'd once stood triumphant over burning colonies, scoffed at primitive species like humans. Now he couldn't keep his claws from shaking. The moment his ship breached the Terran fleet's perimeter, he was hailed. "This is Commander Thralak of the Charnathan Collective," he said quickly. "I request parley. Immediate diplomatic conference." The Terran voice that replied wasn't loud. It was surgical. "There will be no parley. You had centuries to choose peace." The transmission ended. 2 minutes later, the Charnathan vessel was reduced to a cloud of debris, scattered silently into the void. On Earth, the media barely covered the war. That was by design. Public morale was high. Unemployment at historic lows. Galactic trade had boomed since Earth's ascendance. But the citizens didn't know how far their military had drifted from diplomacy. And most didn't care. The average Terran citizen was tired of being disrespected, dismissed. The wars of Earth's past had taught them one thing. When no one listens, you stop asking politely. The real Terran war wasn't for territory. It was for respect. And now they had it, carved into the bones of 100 broken fleets. Ren stood in the Situation Room, observing final preparations for Operation Collapse. A low-ranking officer approached. "Sir, the AI projections confirm. Eliminating the remaining Charnathan infrastructure will set them back at least 300 years technologically." Ren nodded. "That's the idea." "Some in the Confederation are questioning the ethics." Ren cut him off. "Let them question. They questioned everything when we were dying. Now we're just answering in a language they understand." The officer hesitated. "Do you want me to authorize broadcast warnings?" Ren's eyes narrowed. "No." He leaned forward. "No mercy, no monuments, no memory of power." On Valtrax, Dovek received a final transmission from Earth Command. Earth will be withdrawing in 72 hours. Territory cleanup is complete. Regional stability is no longer our concern. No mention of alliance, no offers of aid, just an execution report. Dovek dropped the datapad on the ground and stared at the black sky above. The humans had saved them, but they hadn't done it for them. And now, with the Charnathans broken, the galaxy had a new apex predator. The Terran warships began their withdrawal on the 72nd hour, as promised. No farewell message, no banners of victory, no diplomatic ceremonies or final communiques. They vanished the way they came, silent, swift, and chillingly precise. The skies of Valtrax, once blackened by fire and iron, now stood bare and quiet. Only the ruined surface below remained as a testament. Captain Dovek stood on the edge of a collapsed sky bridge, overlooking what used to be Valtrax Prime's administrative center. It was gone now, just jagged concrete and slag. His second-in-command, Relic, approached, face covered in grime, voice grim. "They're really gone," Relic said. Dovek didn't answer immediately. He was watching the last human dropship disappear into the horizon. He finally spoke. "No, they're not gone, just waiting." Relic frowned. "You think they'll come back?" "Number I think now, we come to them." The aftermath of Earth's campaign was worse than anyone had anticipated, not because of the destruction, but because of the message it sent. Across Drexari space, civilians whispered the new phrase, "Silence before the storm." It had emerged from intercepted Terran fleet chatter, a cryptic line repeated during briefings and encoded ops reports. At first, it meant nothing. But after the humans had reduced an entire Charnathan planet to molten rock without a single audible warning, the phrase took on mythic weight. Silence before the storm. No demands, no negotiations. Just the moment before impact when nothing screamed, yet everything died. High Commander Trevin convened the remaining Drexari leadership in a fortified sub-basement below the shattered surface of Valtrax. The air reeked of ash and recycled oxygen. 12 survivors sat around the table. Some were military, some political. All were afraid. "We have no leverage," Trevin admitted. "No fleet strong enough to match even a fragment of Terran deployment. No economic incentives to offer. We burned those bridges years ago." "So what's your plan?" barked Admiral Krauk. "Lie down and wait for extinction?" Trevin stared at the metal table, then slowly pulled out a Terran datapad. "We learn how they think. We study their doctrine. We stop pretending Earth is just another power and accept that it's now a dominant variable." Another officer scoffed. "That's not strategy, it's submission." Trevin met his gaze without blinking. "It's survival." The chamber fell silent. Because deep down, they all knew. Back on Earth, the situation was entirely different. Clean cities, calm skies, a booming economy fed by post-war reconstruction contracts, and a surge in demand for Terran security consultants. Politicians praised the operation's efficiency. News outlets labeled it a precise liberation mission. But the soldiers who'd been to Valtrax weren't smiling. Sergeant Aidan Cross sat in a therapy room at Fort Cassius, staring at the blank wall. A counselor, young and visibly nervous, sat across from him, trying to fill the silence. "You've been back for 3 weeks, Sergeant," she said softly. "And your after-action report was incomplete." Cross didn't move. "You've been cleared for rotation, but I need you to understand. You can't just lock it away." His voice, when it finally came, was low. "We didn't fight a war." She tilted her head. "Then what did you do?" He looked up, eyes dead. "We executed a civilization." Meanwhile, the Confederation's inner council fractured. The Zelveth wanted immediate diplomatic overtures, inviting Earth to a seat at the table, offering shared governance over regional trade routes. The Trelkson argued against it. "Letting them in legitimizes what they did. We reward annihilation." "But if we don't," asked Counselor Jirek, "they'll never speak to us again. And then we're not just irrelevant, we're prey." Eventually, a neutral proposal was formed. Project Concord, a plan to formally establish Earth as a strategic autonomous entity, a polite way of saying, "We can't stop them, so let's pretend we're in charge." But Earth never responded. The Terran High Command didn't even acknowledge the Council's attempts. Silence. And now that silence scared everyone more than anything else. In the black space between galaxies, something stirred. A forgotten Charnathan remnant fleet, 2 destroyers, and a crippled dreadnought received a signal. Encrypted. Ancient protocol. Origin: unverified. Message: they do not understand what they've awakened. Do not retaliate. Wait. Watch. Prepare. The fleet's captain, Threx Kulmar, read the message again and again. He didn't recognize the encryption. It wasn't Charnathan. It was Terran, but older. Primitive. From Earth's early satellite era. It shouldn't have even reached this far. Kulmar's eyes narrowed. "What the hell have we triggered?" Elsewhere, on a hidden Terran moon facility orbiting a dead planet, General Marcus Wren walked through a secure chamber known only to a handful of humans. Inside were simulation pods, hundreds of them. Each one contained the neural blueprint of a potential enemy. Alien minds copied from prisoners, battlefield scans, recovered black box logs. They were learning, not just how to fight aliens, but how to become what they fear. A lead researcher approached him. The Aegis AI has completed behavioral modeling on Charnathan second-wave psychology. If they regroup, we'll predict their tactics before they think of them. Wren nodded. And the other models? Drexari, Trelkson, Zelveth, complete. Wren's lips curled into something between a smile and a warning. Good, because the war's not over. The researcher blinked. But we've won. Wren turned away. Winning was never the mission. Remembering was. Back on Valtrax, Dovek climbed to the highest peak of the city's edge, a ruined transmission tower where the Drexari once broadcasted to 100 colonies. Now it was silent. He activated an old beacon, not to call for help, but to send a warning. This is Captain Dovek of Valtrax Prime. To anyone listening, Earth is no longer what it was. They came with silence, and they left with ghosts. If you think of allying with them, don't. If you think of fighting them, don't. Just don't forget what they became. He stared into the dark sky, knowing the message might never be heard, but also knowing Earth would hear it. And maybe, just maybe, they'd remember that someone saw the storm coming and still dared to whisper. The silence was the most terrifying part. Galaxies used to roar with traffic, trade convoys, military broadcasts, diplomatic banter. 1 million voices, exchanging commerce, threats, alliances. But now, nothing. Ever since Earth left Valtrax, systems stopped broadcasting openly. Communications grew cautious, coded, paranoid. Entire species shifted their transmission protocols out of fear that Terran ears were always listening. And the worst part? They probably were. 3 weeks after the Terran fleet's withdrawal, the Trelkson capital of Orevan began losing ships. Not to war, to disappearances. At first it was attributed to navigational errors, hyperlane storms, rogue pirates. But then an escort frigate vanished mid-sentence during a standard patrol log. The last words recorded, "I think they're here." No weapon signature, no debris, no distress signal, just gone. The Trelkson High Council entered emergency session. "These are not acts of war," Ambassador Kaishi insisted. "This is psychological warfare." "No," said Admiral Selk. "This is worse. They're not fighting us. They're studying us." Kaishi frowned. "But why now?" Selk's voice trembled. "Because the galaxy still thinks it's safe to forget them." Deep within the Zelveth Empire, a hidden command structure known as the Vault began Project Eclipsion, an attempt to catalog all Terran battlefield data, culture, psychological profiles, and behavioral shifts since their first galactic contact. The conclusion of the first report horrified even the most hardened strategists. The Terran military operates as a species-level trauma response mechanism. No action is purely strategic. Every engagement is emotional. This makes them simultaneously the most predictable and most dangerous force in the known universe. The phrase repeated across the file. They act like a wounded animal, but they hunt like gods. At a refugee hub in the neutral system of Marnus IV, word of Earth's campaign had turned into folklore. Children played a game called Terran Wake. One child would play the alien, building a small structure from rocks and sticks. The other child, playing the Terran, would sit quietly, waiting. When the alien completed the structure and looked away, the Terran would knock it down in a single silent strike. No growling, no warning, just destruction. The rules were simple. The Terran always won. Back on Earth, a summit was underway. Not political, not military. Phantom Directive 01, a gathering of senior Terran psychologists, sociologists, and ex-military tacticians, met to discuss a single question. When does silence become genocide? Dr. Lana Kerr, a neural behaviorist and military trauma expert, spoke first. We've created a doctrine of fear so perfect that it now exists without deployment. Entire fleets panic at our shadow. Entire civilizations crumble from a whisper. A general across the table nodded. Good. That's deterrence. No, Dr. Kerr snapped. That's evolution into monsterhood. The room fell silent, because she wasn't wrong. In the shadow of Earth's unresponsiveness, small coalitions began to form. Species that once hated each other now met in secret, old grudges forgotten, replaced by one unified terror. Humans, a name that no longer meant flesh and curiosity. Now it meant consequence. One such meeting took place on a derelict space station in the remnants of the Axion Belt. Drexari, Charnathan survivors, Zelveth, and even nomadic factions once allied to Earth gathered with a single agenda: understand how to predict Terran behavior. It didn't go well. Each group had seen a different Earth. The explorers, the diplomats, the farmers, the executioners. No one knows which version will arrive, said a Zelveth tactician. Then we assume the worst, whispered a Charnathan defector, and prepare like we're already dead. Meanwhile, in the deep black, Terran stealth fleets moved without orders. They were experimental units, self-learning AI-driven dreadnoughts, project designation Wraithwatch, designed not to destroy but to haunt. One such ship, the ISS Sable Ghost, intercepted a Trelxan probe over the moon of Harvand 3. The AI aboard made a calculated decision. No destruction, no trace. It hacked the probe, rewired its navigation, and let it go. When the Trelxan recovered the probe, it appeared unharmed, until they found the message encoded in Terran binary. It read, "We see your eyes, but your ears are deaf. Fix that before we sharpen the knife again." Back on Valtrax, Captain Dovek had become something of a myth himself. He'd survived, he'd spoken to the humans, and now every faction wanted his insights. A private delegation of Trelxan officials approached him with offers: political asylum, wealth, even military command. All for one thing: intel. But Dovek said the same thing to each of them. You want to understand Earth? You're already too late. What does that mean? They asked. It means Earth doesn't explain itself anymore. You don't reason with the storm. You survive it. Within the fractured remains of the Charnathan military, a small fleet attempted one final act of resistance. A suicide run on the edge of Terran space. One last desperate gesture. They entered a star system labeled Epsilon Prime, a Terran colony world abandoned decades ago. Or so they thought. As they approached, they were met by a single transmission. No visuals, just audio, a child's voice, laughing. Then silence. Their fleet systems went dark one by one. 3 minutes later, orbital images from a Zelveth recon station showed nothing but debris. No record of weapons fire, no heat signatures, only dust. And somewhere, deep in the encrypted Terran command archive, a file was opened by General Marcus Wren. File designation: Requiem contents, classified flagged status, active. He read the first line to himself. When silence is no longer feared, we will speak again, but not in words. He closed the file, then walked out of the room, and no one dared ask where he was going. The galaxy had grown used to Earth's silence. They had learned to interpret it as the space between breaths, the pause before judgment. Entire sectors calculated their expansion or retreat based on whether a Terran fleet had appeared in orbit. Silence had become synonymous with mercy, or at least with delay. But when the silence ended, it didn't end with words. It ended with a pulse. Across 17 known systems, every major communications relay went dark at the exact same second. No warning, no traceable signal, just total blackout. The Confederation panicked. Emergency networks fired up. Proxies were activated. Technicians scrambled across solar arrays to restore contact. But all they found was one file embedded in every broken comm node. The file's name? Requiem. And when they opened it, the galaxy changed forever. It wasn't a virus, not exactly. It didn't hijack systems or erase data. It played. Every screen, every device, every neural uplink suddenly displayed the same sequence. A rotating black cube, humming softly. At first glance, it seemed meaningless, just a shape. Then it began to unfold. One panel at a time, the cube revealed images, blurry, then sharp. Burned Terran colonies, corpses on abandoned mining outposts, refugees turned away by Confederation patrols. Each image was tagged with a date, a name, coordinates, proof. Then came the second sequence, the same locations, now rebuilt, thriving under Terran protection, cities, crops, industry. The cube continued rotating. Final sequence, the faces of the commanders, diplomats, and bureaucrats who had denied Earth aid during its infancy. The screen went black, and a single phrase burned into every retina, neural lens, and HUD screen in the galaxy. You taught us to survive. Now you'll learn what that costs. The message reached the highest tiers of the Confederation within moments. On the Trelxan homeworld, panic surged through the Council like blood through a slit vein. Councillor Avon, once a proud supporter of Terran inclusion, now whispered the thing everyone feared to admit. We didn't just make an enemy. We made an accountant, and now they're settling the books. The phrase spread like wildfire through black markets, rogue militaries, and neutral systems. Requiem Protocol. No one knew exactly what it meant. But they knew it wasn't war. It was something worse. Back on Earth, General Marcus Wren stood in the observatory, an underground command chamber hidden miles beneath the old Andes range. Holograms of 27 star systems floated before him, each one tagged, categorized, compliant, neutral, suppressive, hostile. His second-in-command, Colonel Shea, stood at his side. It started, she said softly. Wren nodded. They needed to remember what silence bought them. They'll respond. Try diplomacy. Let them, Wren replied. We'll log their calls. Note who grovels, who lies, who blames. It's all part of the calculation. She hesitated, then asked the question no one wanted to voice. What happens if they strike back? Wren turned to her, eyes like winter. Then we stop holding back. In a secret meeting on the border world of Nexar 4, a coalition of neutral races debated what to do next. We can't match them militarily, said one delegate. They've mastered psychological warfare, said another. They've mastered us, whispered a third. But one voice, louder than the others, broke the spell. It was an old soldier, a Draxari named Vorn Talik, scarred, respected, and tired. I fought the humans once, he said, on a backwater colony when they barely had plasma tech. We beat them, but they came back 3 years later, not with bigger guns, with resolve. He looked around the table. You don't kill that. You don't intimidate that. You survive it by staying beneath its radar. And if we're already on their radar? Someone asked. Vorn stood. Then pray they stay silent, because if they speak again, it won't be in language. In orbit over the burned world of Tyranxis, a former Charnathan hub annihilated during the Terran campaign, A Terran dreadnought named ISS Grimwatch deployed a classified module. It wasn't a weapon. It was a lighthouse, a beacon broadcasting an AI-curated history of the Terran era, unedited, uncensored. It projected for 4 light-years in all directions. The message was clear: we're not hiding anymore. And behind it, the implication: try us. Aboard the Revenant, Ren sat alone in his quarters, listening to a loop of intercepted council recordings. Fear, rage, confusion. He drank it in like oxygen. Then he tapped into the private channel known only to a dozen Terran commanders across the galaxy. Phase 2 is greenlit, he said calmly. One by one, commanders acknowledged. Understood. Copy. Ready to begin. Ren leaned back. This wasn't conquest. It was presence. Let the galaxy remember Earth not as a planet, but as a verdict. The stars had grown quiet, not peaceful, numb. Across the known galaxy, civilizations trembled under a new reality. Earth was no longer one voice among many. It had become the silence between all others. The force that no longer explained itself. The force that punished not to conquer, but to remind. But the galaxy still didn't understand what it was being reminded of. That understanding would come soon enough. The Council of Interstellar Balance, once a symbol of unity among diverse empires, now operated from a hollowed-out asteroid base called Nexus Hold, far from any established system, cloaked by 3 tiers of encryption fields and stealth satellites. Its members gathered for what might be the last time. The holographic faces were pale, their expressions drawn. No one spoke of expansion anymore. No one debated resource rights or border treaties. There was only one topic on the table: Earth. Councillor Jirek of the Zelveth Empire spoke first. His voice wavered despite his centuries of diplomatic mastery. Requiem protocol has activated in 17 zones. We've lost 2 entire outposts. Not bombed, not invaded. Deconstructed. You mean dismantled? Asked Trelkson Minister Kaisha. Not destroyed, Jarek replied. Just taken apart, as if someone erased the idea of them. A murmur spread across the room. Then Admiral Selk of the Trelkson fleet leaned forward. What do they want? The room fell deathly still, because no one knew. On the surface of an abandoned mining moon in the Tarnus Vale, the ISS Revenant landed with minimal escort. It wasn't a show of power. It was a statement. We don't need protection. We are the threat. General Marcus Wren disembarked alone. He walked across the craggy terrain toward a dome-shaped structure constructed overnight by Terran rapid-print drones. Inside waited a singular guest, Captain Dovek of the Drexari. Once a war commander, now an uneasy envoy. He had been summoned, not invited, by a single untraceable message. You spoke once. Now listen. Ren entered the chamber. Dovek rose but did not speak. Ren didn't offer a greeting. He sat across the table and placed a small device between them. When activated, the device displayed one symbol, a broken circle enclosing a single dot. Dovek frowned. What is that? Earth, Ren said. And how we see the rest of you. Dovek studied the design. A cage. Ren nodded. For years we tried to fit into it. Diplomacy, treaties, cultural exchange. You promised partnership. What we got was pity and distance. Dovek said nothing. Ren leaned forward, voice low. Controlled. You looked at us like we were dangerous children, barely restrained. And maybe we were. But what you never understood was what Earth had already been through before we ever left our solar system. He tapped the symbol. We crawled out of our own extinction, not once, but hundreds of times. Every empire you admire, we've lived through worse versions of them on our own planet. Dovek finally spoke. So this is revenge. Ren smiled faintly. Number its balance. The Requiem protocol wasn't about extermination. It was about weight. For every Terran colony left to burn, a foreign relay station would vanish. For every cry for help ignored, a diplomatic archive would be wiped from existence. Not with bombs, with silence. No explosions, no invasions. Just the quiet, terrifying realization that something once known had been unmade. Removed from maps, memory, and shared databases. Like it had never mattered. On Earth, the populace had changed. Not visibly, but under the skin, in their eyes. Civilians spoke in hushed pride of their military, of their fleets. But there was no celebration, no cheers, just a cold satisfaction that the rest of the galaxy finally got it. Children no longer dreamed of first contact. They dreamed of watching the stars go quiet. Back in Nexus Hold, the Council made one final decision. A delegation would be sent. Unarmed, unarmored, unworthy, but honest. They chose Dovek to lead it, not because he was the strongest, but because he was the last one Earth had spared. Dovek didn't argue. He simply asked, "Where do we go?" The Council replied, "Wherever they allow." The delegation arrived at the edge of Sol's defense net, a sphere of satellites, energy barriers, and stealth mines so advanced that even light itself was delayed upon entry. And then, a path opened. A signal. A corridor. Earth had chosen to respond. Not with guns, not with noise, but with permission. Dovek's ship landed in what used to be Alaska, now called the Quiet Zone. A flat expanse of black stone, marked by pillars of obsidian glass, each etched with the names of Terran dead from centuries of abandonment. No speeches, no banners, just memory carved into silence. There, he met Ren again, flanked by no guards. They walked together through the field of glass. Dovek finally asked, "Is this our punishment?" "No," Ren replied. "This is your syllabus." Dovek looked confused. Ren stopped walking. He gestured at the pillars. "Earth doesn't want your apology, doesn't want your money, doesn't even want your fear. What we want is clarity." He turned. "For every cry you ignored, we built a weapon. For every betrayal, we trained a generation to never forget. That doesn't make us monsters." He stepped closer. "That makes us prepared." The final chapter of Requiem wasn't war. It was a treaty, not one written with ink or terms, but one written in silence. Do not harm Earth. Do not forget Earth. And most importantly, don't speak for Earth, because Earth no longer whispered its intentions. It let them echo. Across the stars, planets resumed operations. Trade opened again, carefully. Borders shifted, gently. And every species that once mocked Terrans now taught their children, never provoke the quiet ones. Because the moment Earth speaks again, it will be too late to listen. The galaxy had learned its lesson. But what it had learned wasn't hope. It wasn't cooperation or shared destiny, or the dream of peaceful coexistence under one star-spanning council. What the galaxy learned was consequence. Across hundreds of worlds, history was rewritten not to glorify Earth, but to explain it. Schoolchildren recited the story of Earth's rise with the same hushed tone used for natural disasters, storms, plagues, unstoppable fires that didn't rage, but waited. Earth was not a superpower, it was a scar. On the edge of a forgotten system once ruled by the Charnathan, a small outpost blinked back online. No message, no signal, just a single statue. Black stone, human-shaped, staring up at the stars. At its base, etched in multiple languages, "You taught us silence." We answered in kind. It was a monument, but no one knew who had placed it. The system was declared off-limits by mutual agreement. No patrols entered, no cargo ships drifted near. They called it Echo's End, and everyone knew why. Back on Earth, in a home near the quiet valleys of what used to be Northern California, General Marcus Wren stood alone on a hillside. He was no longer in uniform. His medals were locked away in a drawer, forgotten. In his hand was a datapad displaying an old image, grainy, washed out. A photo of the first Earth delegation ever sent to the Interstellar Council. Smiles, hope, suit jackets instead of armor. Wren touched the screen gently. The man in the center, smiling, naive, was him. But it felt like another life, another species. Dr. Lana Kerr, now retired from the Earth Defense Psych Corps, lived just a few miles away. Once a week, she and Wren shared coffee under a dome of transparent alloy, watching the stars together. Not to admire them, to monitor them. "It's funny," she said one evening, sipping from a chipped mug, "how the ones who preached peace made us into what we are." Wren didn't respond. He rarely did anymore. Not because he lacked something to say, but because his silence now spoke louder than most people's screams. In a distant quadrant, a small Zelveth research team published a controversial paper. Its conclusion? Earth didn't change the galaxy through conquest. It did so through omission. What it withheld, compassion, speech, aid, is what proved most terrifying. The paper was banned in 6 systems, circulated in 12 underground networks, and quoted in the private logs of 4 military academies. On Valtrax, a young Draxari cadet visited the ruins of the war zone for the first time. His father had served under Captain Dovek, had watched Earth tear the sky open with fire and fury, had told stories about the humans that sounded more like prayers or curses. The cadet walked alone through the broken towers, pausing at a wall etched with Terran markings left by a long-gone Marine squad. He didn't understand the symbols, but he understood the tone. No gloating, no hate, just closure. He bowed his head, not in worship or fear, in respect. Earth's silence never ended. Even after the Requiem protocol had run its course, even after the balance of power was irreversibly altered. They stopped speaking altogether in galactic forums. Their ambassadors returned home. Their ships no longer answered hails. But every few cycles, something would happen. A fleet trespassing in Terran-claimed territory would simply vanish. A diplomat who tried to force negotiation would receive a box. Inside, a single Terran coin, cold, heavy, engraved with one phrase, "Debt settled." Children on distant planets would look up at the sky and ask their parents, "What does Earth look like?" The answer was always the same, "We don't know anymore." And the child would go quiet. Not because they were afraid, but because they understood that some things weren't meant to be touched twice. Captain Dovek, long retired, would often sit beneath the broken arch of Valtrax Prime's command dome. He still carried the first Terran data chip he was ever given. He never played it again, not because he feared it, but because he never wanted to forget the version of himself who had. Back when he still believed Earth was just a planet, not a force, not a response, not the final answer to a question no one should have asked. In the end, Earth never declared victory. There was no flag planted, no anthem played, no grand speech, because Earth had never wanted to win. Earth had only wanted the galaxy to understand one truth: you don't leave your own behind. And when you do, they don't come back looking for help. They come back as the storm you swore would never arrive.